Spirit of life and love, God of our understanding, great mystery that surrounds us. We give thanks for this time together this morning and for the gifts of this day. We are blessed by this community of faith and love. There may seem to be some incongruity between what Chrissy said and that song, and in the literal sense that's true, but that song, like many spirituals of the time, was not strictly about going to heaven, seeing Jesus. It was about escaping from slavery, stealing away, and the coded messages in these spirituals that African Americans would sing about so that they could have and maintain a sense of hope for their ultimate freedom. So it's on one hand about Jesus, on another hand about something different. Our reading this morning is an excerpt taken from a posting on the Huffington Post website that was written by Reverend Anna Levy-Lyons, who is the senior minister of First Unitarian Congregational Society in Brooklyn, New York. It's entitled "The Religious Counterculture, an Open Letter to Religious Liberals." I have taken excerpts from it. The text of the entire posting will be put on the text won't be put on our website, but we'll put a reference to it so you could link to it if you want to read the entire text. And although this is an excerpt, it is a little bit long, and there's a lot in it that I wanted to share with you. So in her letter, her open letter to religious liberals, she starts out, Reverend Levy-Lyons starts out by talking about she had a high school teacher who was in the habit of rattling off oxymorons. So the words like, pretty ugly or jumbo shrimp, constant variable. And she said that this teacher had one other phrase that he would throw in, and that phrase was liberal religion, as an oxymoron. And so she writes, the joke, of course, was that liberal religion couldn't really exist because liberals are not religious, and religious people are definitely not liberal. And of course, as with most jokes and stereotypes, there's some truth to it. If you look at any of the traditional markers of religiosity, we religious liberals are less religious than the conservative or orthodox. As religions have liberalized and modernized over the years, communal religious practices have fallen away and religious fervor has cooled. This may seem obvious and inevitable, but when you think about it, there is no necessary correlation between the substance of a person's theology and the amplitude of her religiosity. We religious liberals have erroneously forged this correlation, and beyond just making us the butt of jokes, this has really cost us. It has cost us in spiritual integrity, it has cost us in political power, and it has cost us in the number of butts in the pews. The questions of to what extent and in what ways we should participate in the dominant culture should keep us up at night. Until our theological ideals are realized on this earth, until we live in societies of boundless compassion where no one is excluded from the tables of abundance, until we lovingly care for all the creatures of the earth, until violence and hunger are relics of the past, religious liberals should not feel at ease in this world. If we do, there's a problem. As Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, there are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted. I would argue that not only should we be maladjusted, but we should actively engage this maladjustment in forming the foundation of a religious counterculture. In this vision, we are both very liberal and very religious. We are community-oriented and God-centered. We unapologetically argue for political and social transformation on the grounds of our faith. We take our religious commitments seriously and on their own terms, rather than measuring them against a secular understanding of what's quote-unquote reasonable. Rather than discard the old religious disciplines of our heritages, We redeploy them in the service of liberal theological ideals. We accept and own the obligation described in some form or another in all the major scriptures to work toward heavenly days right here on this earth. What if we could restore the radical edge and dynamic energy of religious liberalism? What would the world look like if instead of advertising religion light, religious liberals became the most observant people around? What if those of us who consider ourselves theologically liberal began joining liberal religious communities in droves? What if we began tithing to those institutions? What if we observed a Sabbath together and radically disengaged from social and economic structures every week? What if we engaged in serious study of our spiritual texts and heritage and applied these lessons to the issues of today? What if we began lobbying on religious grounds for environmental stewardship? The sky is the limit in reimagining how our faiths call us to practice in the modern world. This is not a call for moral or spiritual perfection, but rather for us all to restore religion as central to our lives. We don't need to retreat from modern life as much as live in counterpoint to it. There will be tension as we negotiate our desire to simply participate as normal people in this society. We'll hear ourselves saying, "Can't I just enjoy a friggin' cheeseburger for God's sake?" We naturally want to succeed in this world. We want to make money. We want to have fun. We don't want to be freaks. We want to feel accepted. The important thing is not that we be perfect, but that we engage with the tension. We're not there yet, but I believe that by building a religious counterculture together, we will find our gravitational center. Our connection to our own God energy and spiritual core will deepen as our lives take on a religious orientation. We'll build internal coherence and integrity. We'll start to take ourselves seriously as religious people, and everyone else will take us seriously too. Our numbers will grow, our influence will grow, and liberal religion will no longer be an oxymoronic joke. A lot to think about there, and I've been thinking about it, and I'm going to share those thoughts in just a little bit. To this day, my daughter Rebecca will not set foot on a sailboat. And of course, she blames this all on me. When she was 9 or 10 years old, I invited her to go sailing with me on a little sunfish sailboat. Now, the sunfish is what's called a wet bottom boat. Not because the bottom of the boat gets wet when you sail it, but because yours does. It's just a little flat piece of fiberglass with a mast and a sail and a rudder and a centerboard. And there's a little, you sit on the deck of it and there's a little cutout in the middle to put your feet in. And you sort of hang off the side. Sunfish aren't meant to be stable. They tip fairly easily, and that's what makes them fun to sail on a warm, sunny day. You fall in, you climb back on, and you go on your way. Maybe 10-year-old Becca didn't know this when she agreed to go sailing with me, but she soon found it out on a gusty July day on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. We were tootling around just fine when a sudden gust of wind knocked us over. We weren't in any danger because we had life jackets on, but we got a good dunking. Becca seemed to take it in stride as I stood on the centerboard to right the boat and then pulled her back on board. But then it began to cloud over. Then the wind died. We were far from shore with no means of getting home other than what's called sculling with the rudder, which is when you push the rudder back and forth really fast to try to make some forward progress. It's not an efficient method of movement. And as the sun had disappeared behind the clouds, it began to get chilly. And did I mention we were wet? Soon Becca's teeth were chattering and there was a blue tinge to her lips. Now, when I told her I was going to tell this story today, she said, "Dad, remind them that I was turning a shade of purple that I'd never seen." She's always been a bit overly dramatic. But it's this memory of being becalmed and wet and bitterly cold on the sunfish that has stayed with her for some 20 years and that keeps her away from sailboats today. I tell you this story because it reminds me of the faith journey that some of us take when we discover a Unitarian Universalist church. It's a journey that starts out with high hopes and great enthusiasm. We board the boat of Unitarian Universalism, envisioning clear skies, a steady wind, and a fun adventure ahead. Even if we get knocked down, by friends who think we're crazy to be going to church, we get knocked down by family members who are baffled by our explanations of what our faith is all about. We get knocked down by religious conservatives who say we're not even a religion. Even if we get knocked down, we get back on the boat and continue on our journey. But then the clouds begin to block out the sun, and the wind disappears. We're becalmed. We're stuck in one place. Our journey soon loses its luster, and the cold starts to creep in. We stop coming to church every Sunday. We stop volunteering to help out. We even begin to skip our small group ministry meetings. Then we start to shiver from feelings of neglect because no one from the church has noticed that we're not around and reached out to us. All we want at that point is to get off that boat or out of the church. What happened? Those who were cast adrift wonder what happened, and those of us who are still here wonder it as well. Now, I'm not likely describing the faith journey of any of you here because you're here. But maybe you've experienced something like this sense of being becalmed, of having your hopes for what our faith can do for you and do to you disappointed, or maybe just not worked out quite as you had hoped and planned. If you're here for the first time today, by the way, we're glad to have you here, and I hope I'm not going to discourage you. There are lots of great things about this church, about our faith, about this particular congregation. But we have to recognize that we're not a panacea, and we're not perfect. One of the primary sources of our greatest disappointment, what takes the wind out of our sails, is ironically one of the sources of our greatest initial enthusiasm about this faith. You heard Chrissy talk about her journey, about how free she felt when she discovered Unitarian Universalism. It's exactly that freedom that kept me going back week after week after I discovered the UU Church. And I'll bet that it's the same for many, if not most of you. We treasure that freedom. Here, as our principles say, we are called to engage in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Here, we don't limit our sources of inspiration to one holy book. Any book may hold inspiration for us and thus becomes holy. Here, we can find enlightenment through our personal experience of the divine, unmediated by anyone, subject only to the interpretations we choose to give those experiences. For those of us who were raised in other faith traditions where we were required to subscribe to a certain creed or set of beliefs, where those beliefs were perhaps rotely recited every Sunday, entering a Unitarian Universalist church can be like breathing again. The bands that held our chest tight, that we didn't even know were there, are sprung loose, and we can finally take in great gasps of life-giving air. When we first discover this freedom, to go back to the sailing metaphor, our sails are filled and we're basking in the sun of a new day. Do you remember those days? Do you remember that when you came here for the first time? Or came to another UU church? But what happens next? After we breathe the air of this newfound freedom, where do we go and what do we do? The freedom this faith offers can propel our boat forward for only so long. Freedom for freedom's sake isn't enough to sustain us over the long haul. It's not unusual that we sooner or later, or at times, find ourselves becalmed and adrift. It's not that the freedom has left us, but that we don't know what to do with it or how to handle it. And sometimes we just might feel that urge. You know that urge that I'm talking about. And we can't believe that we're thinking it, but we are thinking it just the same. We're thinking, just tell me the answers. Just give me the answers. Tell me what to believe, who to believe. Give me something clear and definite to hold on to. If you're like me, you have witnessed people in the midst of tragedy who appear deeply comforted by their faith. Their conviction that my cat, my child, my husband, my friend is at peace, is with God, is with their beloved who predeceased them. And we've said to ourselves, I wish my faith would do that for me. I wish my faith would do that for me. And I am here to tell you that it can and it does. It can if we want it to. But Unitarian Universalism isn't a faith for the faint of heart. We don't offer answers to life's big questions, or sometimes even the small ones. We don't have a pope who tells us whether we can or can't eat meat on Friday, or get married if we're gay. We don't tell you that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God. We don't lay down the law like it does in Leviticus. We don't tell you that you have to bow down and pray 5 times a day. In fact, the lyrics of one of our hymns contains the line that says, someday we'll finally see, even to question truly is an answer. To question is truly an answer. And maybe this is why Anna Levy-Lyon's high school teacher called liberal religion an oxymoron, and why our friends and family don't think we're a real church, and why there's some truth to the accusation that our faith is religion light. You can come to our church, or any Unitarian Universalist church for that matter, and sail around in circles. You can even sit still in the water, going nowhere at all. You can come here on Sunday mornings in hopes of hearing an interesting or inspiring sermon, something to get you thinking. You can come on Sunday mornings just so that your kids have a place to come to learn values and ethics that reflect your own. You can come to this church or any liberal congregation for the community, to gather with other like-minded people who affirm your principles and are generally very nice to hang out with. You can come here because we make beautiful music together, both literally and figuratively. There are those of us here today who have come and who have stayed for decades, perhaps, for just some of these reasons. And that's fine. That's perfectly okay. But what if what you're looking for is to find real meaning and purpose in your life? If what you want is to come to a deeper understanding of yourself and your place in the world? If what you're looking for is some sense that this thing we call life makes sense? Well, you can do that here too, but you've got to be prepared to work at it. The source of our religious authority, the source of your religious authority, doesn't lie somewhere out there. And I am certainly not the source of your religious authority. And so here's both the good news and the bad news. The source of your religious authority is you. The source of your religious authority is you. You create it. You mold it. You shape it. You put together the pieces of the puzzle so that they fit into a picture that's coherent for you. My religious picture may share some of those same pieces with you, but my picture may be very different from yours. The beauty of this is that both pictures are right, and they're true, because they're right and true for each of us. for those of us who have worked hard to piece them together. What makes us a religion is not that we share a common set of beliefs. What makes us a religion is that we are doing religious work. We're doing religious work. The personal spiritual work of making meaning of our lives. The work of healing and hoping and holding and hugging. The work of exploring our deepest fears, our highest aspirations, our yearnings, our longings. Each day, we are called to add new pieces to our own puzzle. A new experience, a new insight, a new question. And our faith will grow and change over time as our perspective is enlarged. What we believe to be true today may not hold true, probably won't hold true for us tomorrow. Because our faith reflects the reality of our lives and the truth of the ages that we all know to be certain. And that is the only thing certain, the only thing constant is change. But here's the catch in all of this. If we are each to be the source of our own religious authority, we've got to engage actively and with purpose our search for truth and meaning. It's not enough that we are free to do this. It's that we actually do it. We can't sit around and wait for someone to come down from the mountain and hand us the stone tablets. We can't sit around here while bushes are burning out there and not see them for ourselves. We become religion light, as they say. We make liberal religion an oxymoron when we choose it to be so. When we're spiritually lazy. When we decide to skip church because we'd rather read the Sunday paper today. When we look at all the adult faith development courses that are listed in our newsletter and decide, no, I can't be bothered with that. It's a Tuesday night. We are accountable to ourselves and to ourselves alone for our own faith journey. No one here, myself included, no one here is going to ask you why you weren't in church last Sunday or when it was the last time that you prayed or meditated. No one is going to tell you that you're going to hell because you didn't volunteer to teach in our religious education program or show up at that rally to end gun violence. That's not who we are and how we do it. So my question for you today is this. What do you want? What do you want? Do you want religion light? Because you can get that here. Are you content to be sitting on that sailboat, becalmed, maybe getting colder and colder, and thinking about bailing out? We can offer that to you, and in fact it happens. It happens more often than we'd like to think about. Or, do you want to build for yourself a life-giving, life-saving, life-sustaining faith? Do you want a religion that will see you through your darkest days and your longest nights? Do you want to be buoyed by a community you're closely connected to on deep, meaningful levels, so that when your boat is battered and capsized, there are others there to help pull you out of the water? We have that here too. But it doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen. It's up to you. It's in your hands. Only you can make this happen if it's what you want. That is the truth of our faith. You can skim along the surface, or you can plumb the depths of your beliefs, your spirituality, your religious understandings. Anna Levy-Lyons asks, what would the world look like if instead of advertising religion light, religious liberals became the most observant people around? And then she tells us, perhaps we will find our gravitational center. Our connection to our own God energy and spiritual core will deepen as our lives take on a religious orientation. We'll build internal coherence and integrity. We'll start to take ourselves seriously as religious people, and everyone else will start to take us seriously as well. Our numbers will grow, our influence will grow, and liberal religion, that term, liberal religion, will no longer be an oxymoronic joke. The choice is ours. The choice is yours, each and every one of you. No one will make this choice for you. The power is in your hands. This day and every day, I wish you peace. Amen.
Our closing words today are from Reverend Barbara Brown Taylor, who writes in her book, A Preaching Life. She writes, if my own experience can be trusted, then God does not call us once, but many times. There are calls to faith and calls to ordination, but in between, there are calls to particular communities and calls to particular tasks within them, calls into and out of relationships, as well as calls to seek God wherever God may be found.